Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So the draft is in almost exactly 3 days from now on Friday night. I'm going to be there in person, and it is time for me to finally give you my top 50 prospects in this year's draft. You've been following me on Instagram or TikTok. You probably saw that I've been rolling out my individual scouting breakdowns for some of the top guys, whether that's grading their different traits, giving them an overall rating based on how high their ceiling is, how high their floor is, giving a player comparison. On top of the fact that a couple days ago, I gave my top 10 defensemen in this year's draft, it is time for me to put together my comprehensive top 50. I did it last year, and we're going to break it down full YouTube. I'm not going to spend like an obscene amount of time going through 31 through 50. I'm actually just going to flash the 41 through 50 graphic, probably talk about it for like a minute or two, then the 31 through 40, and then I'm going to break down the top 30. God knows how long this video is overall. I don't want to make it a 30-plus minute video. It easily could be, but we're going to get into it right now. Now, in looking at my prospect rankings, I am very big on upside. I think if you're drafting, especially within the top 10, you're looking for upside. Not saying that high floor doesn't matter that much. I think some prospects just have are way too variable in terms of their potential outcomes, but I look for a high upside and especially offensive traits for guys this young. I think it is hard to project the defensive, how efficient a player will be defensively at the next level, considering a lot of these guys are playing against guys of their same age and they can just body them around if they're more physically developed. I bet on high upside guys offensively, not saying I don't care about the rest, but just a little justification. If once we're going to get into it, my rankings are probably going to reflect similarly to that. So without further ado, let's get into it. 41 through 50. We got it here. Aaron Kiviharju pictured. Cole Hudson, Emil Hemming, guys like Kiviharju. Eriksson Brunicki, I think, was a pretty interesting piece. Potential solid top four defenseman from Kamloops. Timur Cole is a sleeper guy, in my opinion, playing in the MHL. 6'3" Russian defenseman. Kleber's also a pretty big guy. Carter George, not my number one goaltender. You're going to see I like the Russians a little bit more in terms of the goaltenders. But these guys are all solid second-round grades. I could easily see them going early in the second, maybe even a late first. Cole Hudson, I don't really see the potential with Cole Hudson. I think he can be a solid second-pair offensive defenseman. Not really in love with him. And I know if I'm going to be transparent, it's not like I gave Lane Hudson a first-round grade, but I don't think that he's going to have the same success that Lane Hudson found immediately after at Boston University. Moving on, 31 through 40. Matvei Gridin of the USHL at the 31 spot. Teddy Stiga, I think, is a very solid potential top six forward from the U.S. developmental program. Ilya Nabokov is my number one goalie. No relation to longtime Sharks goaltender Evgeny Nabokov. This guy is 21 years old, but he had a .933 in the KHL this year in like 45 games. So even though he is an overager, considering this guy has been so good at the KHL level, I think I would rather bet on that than like a Carter George, or there's another Russian goalie, Mikhail Yegorov, that are kind of unproven, have not put up dominant stat lines. Considering that, that's why Nabokov is my number one goalie right now. Tarek Parasak, the skating is very concerning. I'm not sure he's ever going to be like an elite first line kind of guy. He has fantastic playmaking and a very good shot, but given that skating at the NHL level, you can get away with it in the WHL, but in the NHL, you really can't escape the low-end skating. Charlie Elick's a very interesting, 6'3" defenseman that I like. Jesse Pulkkinen, another overage guy. He's 19 years old, but he's 6'5". He had 4 points and finished juniors last year in his draft year. Doesn't get drafted and really puts it together. Had a fantastic season this year for finished juniors. So I think that he could potentially be a top four defenseman. I'm pretty higher on him than others. And Ryder Ritchie is another solid prospect. This is my 31 through 40, but without further ado, we're going to dive now into the top 30. At number 30, I have Dean Latorno, the 6'7" forward from St. Andrews College. Yes, he played on the prep circuit. He did dominate, though. He had 61 goals, 66 assists for 127 points in 56 games. He is very raw, but given the offensive traits that I talk about, the potential offensive upside that this guy has, fantastic shot. He's a pretty solid skater, again, for a guy that's 6'7", and I really like the fact that he's going to Boston College where they're going to develop him properly. It's not like he's going to some rinky-dink I think he might actually be spending a year in the USHL, then to Boston College, but compared to other situations, I think the college route is very good for a player like this that's going to take 3 to 4 years to develop, but I would happily risk a late first, early second round on a guy that could have potential first line game breaking size and overall solid skating with that shot. I would bet on his upside. I would bet on his offensive upside. At number 29, I have Henry Muse, this guy was looking like a lottery pick entering this year, but he kind of fell off even though he had 61 points in 65 games. I don't think that he maybe has the upside of some of the other defensemen that we're going to talk about within this top 20 for the most part, but I still think that he is a very, very good defenseman in his own right. A very good skater. He is only 6 foot, but he's not undersized by any stretch. A very good skater, can make solid plays with the puck, as well as the fact that he's not some defensive liability. I think Henry Muse, I saw some mock draft have him like 67. I think it was a mock draft that we reacted to on this channel. He should not go past 40th overall. That would be a massive steal if Henry Muse falls past the mid-second round. I personally would use a late first-round pick, especially if my defensive prospect pool was lacking. I think Henry Muse can easily end up being a top 5 defenseman from this draft, and this draft is pretty loaded defenseman-wise. At 28, Jet Luchenko, the Gulf Storm this season. Only 20 goals, but 54 assists for 74 points total in 68 games for the Gulf Storm. Just a very reliable two-way guy. When looking at it, we talk about him. You talk about a high IQ guy that works hard. Doesn't really have any traits that stick out in my opinion, so I can't really put him top 25, top 20, but I think this guy has very solid middle sixer written all over him. I think playoff teams that are drafting in this range are going to look for a guy like Jet Luchenko that maybe could be ready to play at the NHL level by his draft year +2. He is that good, hardworking, kind of ideal player for a contender on their ELC. I think that he gets snagged up definitely by like pick 35. At 27, we have Andrew Basha, kind of a similar mold to a Jet Luchenko in the sense that doesn't really do anything at an elite level. He had a very impressive stat line, but that was in part because he played with Caden Lindstrom and Gavin McKenna on the Medicine Hat Tigers. 35 goals, 50 assists, 85 points in 63 games. Similarly to Luchenko, I think a kind of contender will probably pick him up in this range. Not the highest upside, but definitely a decent floor, but I can't really put him that high. Next up, Stolberg, Sten Stolberg from Norway. This guy is massively risen. This guy does have a decent amount of upside because when you look at him at the World Championships with Norway, he was arguably their best defenseman as an 18-year-old, high motor guy, very physical. Not sure he's ever going to become a legit number one. He's not going to become a legit number one defenseman, but has the potential to maybe be a very, very good second pair guy, maybe low-end first pair guy, physical, not afraid to throw the body. I like him a decent amount. I wouldn't put him top 20 again because of some offensive limitations that I'm not sure that he has that high of a floor, but I like him a decent amount. He's I think he's my 11th best defenseman in this year's draft. Another defenseman at 25, Adam Jiricek. I'm lower on him maybe a little bit than others. When looking at him, didn't really play a ton this year in the Czech League, only 19 games, only had 1 point. But when looking at him, he does resemble David Jiricek a little bit. Smooth skater, 6'2". If he can stay healthy and develop properly, he could be a very solid first pair, top pair, very good two-way defenseman. And as a result, I think using a first-round pick on him is very justified. I wouldn't even hate the 17th to 20th overall pick. I see the upside with Adam Jiricek. Just the lack of games and the injuries is a little bit scary for me. At 24th, I have Yegor Surin, 6'1" Russian who dominated the NHL this year with 52 points in 41 games. Very good shot, very high level of compete. On top of the fact that he is an August birthday, so he's still 17 years old. He's one of the youngest players in this entire draft class. I like the Russians in this draft. I'm not going to lie. Outside of one of them, if you watch my defenseman video, you probably know who I'm referring to. I probably just spoiled it with that. But Yegor Surin is a guy that I see getting mocked between 35 to like 45. I think that this dude should be a first-round pick. I think that he has a very, very high upside and could eventually be a first-line center at the NHL level. 23, another Russian forward, Nikita Artemonov. Nikita Artemonov, I don't think has the potential upside of a Yegor Surin, but when looking at Nikita Artemonov this year in the KHL, was extremely productive. 23 points in 56 games. This guy has an extremely high motor, despite only being 5'11", is not afraid to get in the greasy places, not afraid to throw the body. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a legit first liner, but I think he can definitely be a solid second liner at the NHL level. And considering he was very productive at the KHL level, I think that there's an extremely high floor with a guy like Nikita Artemonov. I'm very interested to see next year if he takes yet another step in the KHL and goes for like 35 points in 56 games. That would be very impressive. Another defenseman, Leo Salin Wallenius, when looking at him this year, had 42 points in 41 games in the Swedish U20 League, was very good for Team Sweden. He had 25 points in 28 games with Team Sweden, mostly at U18 tournaments. A very, very good playmaking offensive defenseman. I think he projects as a 35 to 40 point second pair guy. Very smooth skater. I'm pretty high on him. I got another Swedish defenseman that's going to be coming up that I'm extremely high on that actually plays with Sahlin Wallenius, but I think Sahlin Wallenius is being underrated by other people right now, and he definitely should be a first round pick, and maybe in that low 20, high teens would be a little bit of a reach for me, but low 20s would make sense for Wallenius. At 21st, Michael Hage. Looking at Michael Hage this year, extremely productive for the Chicago Steel. 33 goals, 42 assists, 75 points in 54 games. Quick, fast off the rush, has a decent amount of high offensive upside if he's developed properly. Projects as a potential 55, 65 point second line center. Not sure he's ever going to be a first line center, but definitely a solid prospect coming out of the USHL. A lot of USHL prospects. It's a decent year for them this season. 20th overall, EJ Emery. I have EJ Emery here. Not a ton of offensive upside, although I think his offensive game is a little bit underrated when looking at it. Only had 16 points in 61 games with the U.S. national team developmental program. But that's because he kind of just knows his role. He transports the puck out of the defensive zone, but he's more of a stay-at-home defenseman. He's not going to be making creative, dangerous plays in the offensive zone. I think that he can be a solid top pairing defensive defenseman. 6'3", only 185 pounds right now, so he definitely needs to put on some weight, but he plays like he's 205, 210 pounds. He's a very strong kid. On top of the fact that the combine, he finished in like top 5, top 10 of most of the athleticism events in this. He's an extremely athletic 6'3" defensive defenseman from the U.S. national team development program going to North Dakota. I can easily see him eventually being a top pair, very, very good defensive defenseman that still has some offensive upside, 25, maybe 30 points. But I'm pretty high on EJ Emery. I think he's a very high floor guy, but also has a high ceiling in terms of being a lockdown defensive guy. He's one of the guys that I think his defensive skills will translate to that next level, given his athleticism and his overall build. 19th, this might be the guy that I am highest out of anybody in this entire draft. Alphonse Frey as my 19th best prospect in this entire draft. Wallenius was actually more productive. Frey only had 33 points in 41 games for the same team at the Swedish U20 level. But this guy, especially, he's far better defensively than Wallenius. Not saying Wallenius is a massive defensive liability, but Frey is just one of the best skaters in this entire draft. Extremely high IQ, able to get up in the rush or defend the rush. I am very high on Alphonse Frey. I think that he's going to be one of these Swedish underrated defensemen that when he's a top pairing guy in 4 to 5 years, we think, why did this guy go 42nd overall? I've seen him get mocked outside of the second round. I've seen him in the third round. I think that this guy is going to be a massive steal. Yes, he's maybe not playing against SHL competition. Hopefully next year he takes that next step. But I think when you watch this guy skate and with his overall IQ, he is going to be a steal. He is going to be an absolute stud. I'm praying that the New York Rangers or Toronto Maple Leafs or Carolina Hurricanes do not select this guy. I will be pissed. He's not going to go 19th overall. He's not even going to go 25th overall. Probably not even a first round pick. But I am very high on him. At 18th, another guy that has a shit ton of potential, Trevor Conley. When talking about offensive potential, offensive skill, there's an argument that he's like the third most skilled guy behind Ivan Demidov, behind Malcolm Celebrini. He's an absolute gamer, fantastic in transition in his own zone. This year in the USHL, besides James Hagens, who tore it up at the USHL with the U.S. developmental program, he led the entire USHL in points per game with 78 and 52. Yes, there's some off-ice concerns. Yes, he maybe makes some stupid plays at times. Gold medal game of the U18 World Juniors, took a major penalty. But Trevor Conley has so much goddamn potential, and I'm willing to bet on that potential within the top 20. And I think he's consensus around like 15th, 20th. I'm not like making a massive stand on him, but I have him at 18th. 17th. Michael Brandseg Nygaard. When looking at him, very, very good World Juniors this year that kind of put everybody on notice with Norway. On top of the fact, he wasn't in the Swedish Juniors. He was in the Swedish like AHL equivalent. And he had a solid 18 points in 41 games on top of having a very, very productive playoffs for his respective team. He dominated the SHL U20 league. He had 12 points in 7 games, so he was too good for that. They moved him up. And when looking at it, I don't think that he has extremely high potential, but this guy, considering he was playing against grown men this season, I think is going to be either a very, very good second liner, maybe a low-end first liner. I don't love him, maybe like some others, but I do agree that he's a decently high floor guy and probably should be used with a late lottery pick, if not really fall past like 21st, 22nd overall. 16th, another guy that I'm decently high on, Igor Chernyshov. When looking at him, extremely productive in the MHL, 28 points in 23 games, then gets the call up to the KHL. Didn't really play that much in the KHL because the young guys really never play that much in the KHL unless you're Matvey Michkov. But when looking at him, or Anton Silyev, or Nikita Artemonov, but he was on a fantastic team. He was on Dynamo Moscow. They're one of the best teams in the entire league. So when looking at it, 6'2", 200-pound winger, a very smooth skater, has a very good shot. I think that he's that ideal power forward going forward. A team like Chicago that's picking at 18th overall that has gone more so skill and speed, I think will. Chernyshov still has very good speed. He's a very good skater. But I think that would be kind of like a perfect fit as a potential Connor Bedard line mate down the line. I'm pretty high on Chernyshov. I think that his style of game really suits the modern NHL. And as a result, I have him pretty high at 16th overall. At 15th, Carter Yakimchuk. Carter Yakimchuk seems to be the odd man out when it comes to these elite defensemen. Very productive this year for the Calgary Hitmen. 30 goals, 41 assists in like 66 games. I have some concerns about his skating at the next level, some concerns about his playmaking, but I do think that he is a very, very good defenseman prospect. And if he falls past 13th, 14th overall, 15th, 16th overall, he's well worth that selection and could potentially be a solid top pairing offensive defenseman. He's definitely a tier up from an Alphonse Frey, even though I love Frey, but he's not quite in that elite top 4 in my opinion. So as a result, I have him here at 15th. At 14th, I have Liam Greentree. Liam Greentree, extremely skilled, 6'3" guy in the OHL this season. 36 goals, 54 assists, 90 points in 64 games. The skating's a concern. The skating is definitely a concern, but you watch this guy play on not that good of a Windsor team, and he was making everything happen. I think if you give this guy more talent, he's only going to continue to develop. Reminds me a little bit of last year with Quinn Musty. Quinn Musty, bigger guy. Greentree is a little bit more physical than a Quinn Musty, but when looking at it, the skating was lacking. But Quinn Musty looks like he's trending in the right direction. I'm willing to bet on the skill set of Liam Greentree, and unlike maybe some other guys where the skating is a pretty big deal, like Tarek Parasak, the fact that Greentree is 6'3" and has all these tools, even if he doesn't turn into the best skater, I think given his shot and playmaking ability, he's going to make it work. He just has that NHL prototypical build, and I think his skating will continue to develop to a degree. He's never going to be a great skater, but he can definitely be an okay one. Beckett Seneca at 13th. This guy is one of the biggest enigmas. I don't even know if we're using that word correctly. One of the biggest question marks in this draft. There's hype that he might go 5th overall to Montreal. Some people have him outside of the top 20. I do agree that he's a very good prospect. When looking at him, 68 points in 61 games this year in the OHL. But the tools that he has, especially after going from 5'11" to 6'3" in the last year, his tools are very impressive. Very, very good skater, playmaker. Also has a very good shot. When looking at him at the next level, he kind of has that ideal skill, speed, playmaking build that people are looking for with their NHL wingers. So I think Seneca, I'm not extremely high on him. I see some people that have him top 7. I don't really see that, but I think he can be a solid 25 and 35 kind of first liner, maybe even a little bit better. And as a result, that's why I have him at 13th. At 12th, I have Anton Silyev. When looking at Anton Silyev, there's no denying that he moves extremely well for a 6'7" defenseman. My problem is the offensive IQ, the offensive playmaking really isn't there. And I wouldn't use a top 8 pick on a guy that doesn't really offer me that much offensively. I know he's a defenseman, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to do both, especially in the modern NHL that tends to lean more so offensively. If I'm using a top 8 pick, I'm using it on one of the top 4 guys that bring kind of both to the table to a degree. I think Anton Silyev is going to be a very, very good top 4, maybe even top pair shutdown defensive defenseman. But I think that his ceiling offensively is like 35 points at most. So as a result, I have him here at 12. I still think he's a very good prospect, but I'm just not really in love with him. At 11, Cole Iserman, another guy that is a big question mark heading into this. Fantastic shot, but the rest of the game isn't really there. I think his skating and playmaking is a little bit over-criticized. It's not that good, but again, relative to the shot, it is pretty disappointing. It leaves some to be desired. He has a decently high compete level. The defense isn't quite there, but you're paying this guy to score goals, and I think if he falls past 12th overall, that's very good value, especially if you have good playmaking, one or two good playmaking centers. I think you pull the trigger on a Cole Iserman. I think when looking at individual traits, he arguably has the most important individual trait in this entire draft, which is goal scoring in the modern NHL. And I think he will, if developed properly. I think he's going to be a very good player. At 10th, into the top 10, TJ Ginla. I'm not extremely high on him, but I definitely see the vision with a guy like TJ Ginla. Solid 6 foot, hard-nosed, power forward. I gave him Travis Konechny for a player comparison. He plays like he's 6'3", has a very good shot, able to get up on the rush, solid skater, really just does everything at a pretty high level, nothing really special, but I think TJ Ginla can eventually be a 35 goal, 35 assist kind of guy, so I would use a top 10 pick on TJ Ginla. I wouldn't use the 5th overall pick if I was the Montreal Canadiens, but I could definitely see Calgary taking him. I could definitely see New Jersey considering a guy like Ginla. I think he's going to be NHL ready relatively soon given his play style. He's a solid prospect in my opinion. At 9th, Zeev Boyum. When looking at him, a very slippery defenseman, as I described in my top 10 defensemen in this class. 50 points in 42 games on Denver this year. Historic numbers. Now, granted, Denver was one of the best teams in the entire NHL, one of the best offenses in the entire NHL, but rightfully so. He was their top defenseman. It's going to be interesting to see how his game translates to the next level, considering he does a lot of his work offensively at the blue line, doing one-on-ones where he has a lot of space. Is that going to be the case at the NHL? I'm not sure exactly how translatable his game is, but given this guy's high offensive IQ and just ability to find teammates, I think he's going to be at the bare minimum a second pair offensive defenseman, worst case third pair power play merchant. But I think he has the potential to be a very, very good offensive top pair guy, get you 55 to 60 points. Not sure he's ever going to be a true number 1, but definitely worth a top 10 pick. At 8th, Sam Dickinson, more so of a two-way guy. 6'2", plays both sides of the ice very well. His defensive IQ and stick is very impressive when watching him. Offensively, he has a very solid shot. Rifled home 18 goals this season. Not sure if similarly to Boyum, not sure he has the potential to be a legit top 20 defenseman in the entire NHL, but I think similarly to like a Noah Hannafin type, he's going to be a very, very good top pair guy, and as a result, should be a top 10 pick. At 7th overall, my bad, Berkeley Cadden. Berkeley Cadden has kind of fallen off a little bit when looking at him this year. Fantastic numbers in his draft year, 116 points, 54 goals, 62 assists. Legendary draft year in the WHL. Yes, there are some concerns that he's only, 5'11", only 165 pounds, 170 pounds right now. He might have to move him over to winger. I'm going to be fully honest, but I think given this guy's speed and skill, he's arguably the best player in this entire draft. I think I would just straight up say he's the best player in this entire draft in transition, creating off the rush. I think that is going to translate to the NHL. He's not 5'9" or even 5'10", so I think as long as he packs on some weight, given this guy's skill, offensive skill, he can be very good, and he's not that much of a defensive liability. He played on the penalty kill a decent amount for the Spokane Chiefs. I think that he can be okay, serviceable defensively at the next level. 6th, Konsta Helenius. This guy has been described as a high floor guy. I think he has a decent amount of high upside as well. I don't think that it's fair to say that he's just going to top out as a third line center or second line center like some people are saying. He was very good this year in Liga. Yes, he wasn't that good. It's so stupid. People care more about what he did at World Juniors for 6 or 7 games than what he did against grown men in Liga. And he was very good in Liga, 36 points in 51 games, which is on par with all the other best Finnish prospects of the last decade. This guy is a good playmaker. He has a surprisingly good shot, while also, in my opinion, being the best defensive forward in this entire draft class. I think he can definitely end up being a low-end number 1 center. Never going to be a legit top 15 center in the entire NHL, but he can either be one of the better second-line centers in the entire NHL or a low-end, top-end center. I think that he's worthy of arguably a top 5 pick. He's not going to go in the top 5. He's probably not even going in the top 10. It's going to be a steal. Hopefully I look back on this next year or 5 years from now, and Helenius is absolutely tearing it up. I said from day one he was my guy. And I'm sticking to it. I'm sticking to it based on what I've seen from him over the past year. It's only strengthened my thoughts of him. Well, some other guys have risen ahead of him. I had him 3rd coming into the season. But I'm still very high on him, higher than him the most at, what is he, 6th in my prospect rankings? Yeah, 6th. Very high on him. At 5th, Artem Leshinov, not my number one defenseman, but I still think he's a very good prospect, very good both ways. I think he is a little bit more of an offensive defenseman than a defensive defenseman. But when looking at him, 35 points in 38 games this year, has all the tools of an eventual very, very good top pair guy, low end number one guy at 6'2", 210 pounds, can be very active and effective with his stick. Not sure that he has the offensive upside to eventually be a franchise defenseman. If I was Chicago, I would pick Demidov or the guy that I have at number 3. But I understand. I don't think it's it would be the most egregious thing ever. I think Leshinov is going to be a good top pairing defenseman. And when looking at Chicago, they obviously don't have a sure thing top pairing defenseman right now. I think Korchinski is going to be the offensive guy, top pair offensive. But Leshinov would be a good add for the Chicago Blackhawks, even at second overall. At fourth, Zane Parik. He is the one guy, in my opinion, that I can see being that superstar top pair number one defenseman. When looking at him, just such an effective skater, especially in transition, getting up in the rush. His shot is the best out of any defenseman in this entire draft. He's able to keep it low to get deflections, get redirections, get rebounds. It is very impressive watching him just overall operate an offense from the blue line. I think that he can potentially be that franchise guy. Defensively, he has some strides to be made, but I think he doesn't have the best straight line speed, but given his fantastic edges and acceleration, I think that he can work on that defensively and at least be okay. When looking at the top defensemen in the entire NHL, it's a lot of guys that are fantastic offensively and then solid defensively, maybe above average. But I think Zane Parik at the next level, given the proper coaching and development, has the potential to be a superstar. Not saying he's leagues above Artem Leshinov. He's more risky than Artem Leshinov, don't get me wrong, but I think he has more potential than Artem Leshinov. At number 3, Caden Lindstrom. Going back to it, similar to Zane Parik, offensive potential, man. When looking at Caden Lindstrom, 6'4", 210 pounds, skates the way that he skates with the shot that he has. I think he needs to work on his playmaking a decent amount. He did improve compared to last year, but he still has a long way to go if he wants to stay at center. I honestly think for what's best for him and what's best for the team that's most likely to draft him right now, the Columbus Blue Jackets, is probably a move over to wing. But Caden Lindstrom has potential to be a legit 40 and 40 guy, arguably 45 and 45. If him and Fantilli really, really hit, that could be one of the best 1-2 combos in the entire NHL in 7-8 years from now. And I think he's well worthy of a top 5 pick. At second, you probably know what it is by now. Ivan Demidov, 60 points in 30 MHL games this year, especially after testing at 6'1.5", 192 pounds. He's not some 5'10", 5'11" guy. He is an NHL build already when looking at him. On top of the fact that this guy is the best pure playmaker in this entire draft. So silky smooth with his hands, able to find the open teammate. Defensively, you're not getting much for him, but he's a Russian winger. You don't really expect that much. He has a pretty high level of compete, but you're not expecting him to be a defensive beast. I think that this guy could legitimately be a 95, 100-point guy in the right situation. Where he's going to get drafted, it is up in the air at this point, but I am very high on Ivan Demidov. And then lastly, Macklin Celebrini. No shit here. He is by far the best prospect in this entire draft. 32 goals, 32 assists, 64 points in 39 games this year at Boston University. He's going to be a San Jose Shark. He, in my opinion, his floor is like a 70-point low-end number one center based on what we've seen from him. He just does everything at an extremely high level. Nothing. I wouldn't say he does anything he doesn't have, obviously, like McDavid's skating, Bedard's shot, Mario Lemieux's physical overall build, but he just does everything at a very high level, and as a result, he is one of the best prospects of the last decade and seems near bust-proof, if that's actually a word. So I think that he is definitely my number one guy. Let's go over it again. 41 through 50. 31 through 40, 21 through 30. I believe that the order is correct. That'd be bad if I mix this up. 11 through 20, and then 1 through 10. This ended up being like a 30-minute video, but hopefully you watched it all the way through. Let me know in the comments. Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Again, if I have a guy 5 spots, 31 to 36, it's not that big of a gap. Even 17th to 21st, not that big of a gap. But let me know in the comments, who'd you move up, who'd you move down, who am I an idiot for being too high or too low on? I'll be seeing you in the next one.